So good evening, folks, and welcome to the Forestry Fall Webinar Series. We're excited to have you with us tonight. I'm Billy Thomas. I'm an Extension Forester here in the Department of Forestry. Behind the scenes is Miss Renee Williams. She's running the production behind there. And I have sitting with me tonight Mr. Floyd Willis. Floyd is a forester with the Kentucky Division of Forestry. He actually happens to be the fire management chief for the Division of Forestry. So Floyd, so glad to have you with us tonight.
Well, thank you very much, Billy. It's an honor to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Well, we're excited to have you. Floyd's going to be talking about a hot topic tonight. We're going to be talking about wildfires and the impact that they can have here in Kentucky on our woodlands. Certainly, Floyd, we have way too many wildfires here in Kentucky, and we're hopeful that this program that you're doing tonight will kind of help get the word out about the issues associated with that.
Yeah, most of the fires that we have are human caused, so they're definitely preventable. And that's one of the big reasons I'm here, to try to spread the word that, it's basically up to us to prevent a lot of these wildfires.
Certainly, yeah. It's in our hands. So.
Yeah.
All right, before I turn it over, I do want to make a couple of real quick thank yous. I would like to thank the county extension agents for opening up their offices and serving as hosts for this webinar series. We really appreciate that. For those of you that are watching from home, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be with us tonight. This is the final installment of the 2015 UK Forestry Fall Webinar Series. So we're really excited to be wrapping this session up with a really important topic, Floyd, on wildfire. So we're going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Floyd. Again, please use the chat pod to put any questions in there. And I will say, if you are watching the recording, those chat pods and those other pods aren't active, but you can check out our website at www.ukforestry.org to get any more information. So, Floyd, I think we're going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you get started with your presentation. Again, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
And thanks for having me, Billy. Appreciate it.
Great.
Okay, to get started, kind of want to define what a wildfire is. A wildfire is an uncontrolled fire in an area of combustible vegetation that occurs in the countryside area. And the key word here is uncontrolled. Usually these fires start, and there's no we'll talk about later, control lines or any way to stop the advancement of the fire. Typically here in Kentucky, we do use water, especially the volunteer fire departments, which we'll talk about later. But typically the technique that we use is to actually cut the fuel off from the fire to keep it from advancing forward. The picture that you have here is a picture of a forest fire here in Kentucky, a wildfire. And as you can see, this is typically what it looks like. This will be, of course, a scene at night, and many people that live in Kentucky, especially East Kentucky, have seen this probably driving down the roadway. Now, in contrast, there's what we call prescribed fire, and prescribed fire is the controlled application of fire to the land to accomplish specific land management goals. Ignitions, or in other words, the way the fire starts, may be either human or naturally caused. This picture here is what you would typically see on a prescribed fire, and one thing to definitely notice here is the fires, the direction the fire is going on the land. As you can see, the fire is actually heading downhill here, and by doing that, it is going a lot slower, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But as the fire goes up a hill, here, like I said, it's going downhill here. And as it's going downhill, actually with gravity, the fire usually will not burn as intense as it will uphill. Fire is one of the few things that burns uphill faster than it does downhill. And what you have as a result is the fire is usually low on the ground. It doesn't have a real high flame heights, and the trees are typically not damaged as much. So in a prescribed fire, one of the things that you might want to use a prescribed fire for is if you wanted to increase such things as wildlife habitat, and even if done properly, you can help advance certain species of trees and vegetation, such as possibly oak and hickory. and that's what it's utilized for, prescribed fire. Okay, why do we want to suppress wildfires in Kentucky? And I wanted to put in a clip here from the first fire chief of the U.S. Forest Service, Gifford Pinshaw. It's what he says here is without natural resources, life itself is impossible. From birth to death, natural resources transform for human use, feed, clothe, shelter, and transport us. Upon them we depend for every material necessity, comfort, convenience, and protection in our lives. Without abundant resources, prosperity is out of reach. So, here in Kentucky, our forests are a huge part of our economy. They're also a huge part of our recreation, what we like to do. So many people utilize the woodland, and an uncontrolled wildfire, as we'll talk about later, can cause a lot of economic and just cause so much damage to the woodland to the point where it's affecting our day-to-day lives. The history of fire in Kentucky. Wildfires have been occurring in Kentucky for thousands of years. Native Americans used fire to clear land for wildlife, and early settlers, European settlers, adopted these same land clearing techniques without control lines or any avenue of the fire stopping. And back again, there were no control lines, so the fire itself is really dependent on weather. So if you had a drought situation or a time when the fire, there's no rain and the fire could just keep going, it would burn day and night. So you could have fires that would go for thousands and thousands of acres, all depending on the weather. Especially when you had a large wind event and it was dry, you can really have the fire move along. This illustration that I have up here, it also will kind of show some things. You can see from this picture, this fire, you notice there's a lot of white ash here. This fire burned very intense here, and one reason it burned so intense, there was a lot of heavy fuel. And what we mean by heavy fuel is like this dead tree that's on the forest floor here. When the fire came through here, it burned very hot. I would suspect that the fire also ran uphill here. And like I said earlier, the fire would be coming in that direction. It would really race up this hill, and it actually preheats itself, and in certain situations can even cause its own wind ahead of the fire, which drives the fuel up above. So if the fire was coming up the hill and up in this area, up on the hill, it would actually burn hotter than it would start where it started at the bottom. So that's the concept to remember as far as the fire going uphill. And as you can see here in this illustration, this is after the fire came through. There's still some of the heavier fuels burning, and you can see there was a lot of devastation where this fire raced up the hill there. Forest protection laws. The first forest protection laws were enacted in 1831 in a few specific counties with heavily wooded areas. The fine and penalty for setting fire then was $20. What happened, as European settlers came in and started settling here in Kentucky, and they would build their structures and homes near the woodlands, and then these uncontrolled fires would be threatening those, and it just got to the point where they realized that they were going to have to take some measures to try to prevent so many fires. Here's some data on the last 10 years of the Kentucky wildfire causes from 2005 to 14, and there's some very key things to pick up here. Lightning, which is right here, that's a natural cause of fires, and in the western part of the United States, it's one of the most prevalent reasons that there are fires. You'll have storm systems that come through with very little rain, and you'll have lightning strikes, and with that lightning strike, it'll ignite a fire because the vegetation is usually so dry. But in 10 years, there was documented 56 fires in Kentucky caused by lightning. And take that versus the number one, which is arson, and arson is human cost. We had 9,442. So you can see the huge difference. So if you take arson and debris burning, which is somebody burn a pile of brush behind their house or on their farm, and it gets away from them. So those two together make up the bulk of the fires that we have here in Kentucky. So that's one key thing to remember, is that the bulk of the fires that we have in Kentucky, the wildfires, are human caused and are definitely preventable. In that time, there was 14,837 fires total in that 10-year period. In the next slide, here's the acres burned in that same time period, 2005 through 2014. So we had the 14,837 fires, and it added up to 403,938 acres, which is a pretty large number. If you think about your own farm, the average farm in Kentucky somewhere around 100 acres. So you think about, that's a lot of farms. The timbers burn over in that amount of time. Also, you can see here from 2005, we had one low year here, 2013. A lot of that is these variances in years. You might have I remember the fall of 2013 was extremely wet. We had a lot of rain. So like I said, weather really plays a huge role in the numbers of fires that we have. You can trace back, don't have it on this chart, but you can go back to 1999, 2000, 2001, and the fire numbers were really high, but that was also coincided with the drought that we had during that period. The economic impact to Kentucky from wildfires is in the billions of dollars over that 10-year period that I just described. The timber value lost. UK, Jeff Stringer has done a report. They did a study, and it just showed, the average of over $400 per acre on average each time a wildfire goes through a woodland. And, it doesn't take very long for that to add up. If you think about your own woodland that you have, and say you have 100 acres, and you start losing $400 an acre, that adds up pretty quick. That's just the timber value, immediate timber value. There's also when a tree is damaged, a lot of times it still stays alive, which we'll talk about later, but that crown space is still being taken up, and by it being covering the ground with, or shading the ground with an unproductive tree, can cause a lot of impact in the future. Your regeneration is not going the way it should. Typically, in a wildfire, most of the damage occurs when a fire races up a hill. And this is an illustration right here, another picture at nighttime, and you can see this fire's going uphill at a quick rate. As it's going up this hill, you can see the flame height is really high, and it's racing up the hill. So the trees that are on this hillside are going to end up having a whole lot of damage on them. And here's the result of if you have a fire racing up a hill. Damage to the tree typically occurs on the uphill side of the tree. What happens is the leaves will build up on the uphill side, and it causes it to become hotter at that portion of the tree. As you can see here with this illustration or this picture, this is probably years after the fire came through. Excuse me. What happens here is there's damage to the cambium layer, and over time that allows rot to get on the inside of the tree, and it causes over time the tree will actually become hollow. And unfortunately, the 80% of the value of the tree is the first 16 feet of the tree. So with that damage, if you can come back in 20 years and this tree is not going to be worth any more than it is right now. So this is also called a cull tree, and also this damage is sometimes referred to as a cat face. Okay, the Kentucky Division of Forestry utilizes several different types of resources to suppress wildfires. And usually, typically what happens when we have a wildfire, it's called into the local 911 center in the county. And usually the first responders are typically volunteer fire departments. Excuse me, this is this picture here is an example of what would typically be a fire department might respond with as what we call an engine, and sometimes they refer to it as a brush truck. It's not as big as some of the structural engines that they have. You can see here that it would have the water tank here on the back. It's a little bit more versatile. So they would respond to the fire. If the fire hadn't got too big yet, they could immediately go out and maybe possibly spray the fire out, which they do oftentimes. We rely on our volunteer fire departments very heavily, and they're a great resource for us. Also, probably our number one resource is our wildland firefighters that we utilize. In this picture, you can see some of the clothing that they wear. They don't have all their protective equipment on here, but the yellow shirts that you see here are Nomex, and then the green pants are also Nomex. They wear leather boots, and then as we go along, you'll see that with the full PPE on, that will have hard hats and gloves and so on and so forth. Also, what we call a fire shelter. Like I said, this resource is very valuable to us. All these wildland firefighters go through extensive training. We also travel out of state to become more experienced and to have some good training as we go along, so we can come back to Kentucky and be more experienced and be able to face all the different challenges that we have on a typical forest fire. We contract the airplanes during a fire day, during our fire season. In East Kentucky, we'll have we can't have 4 planes up at once, and what these planes do is they fly pretty close to a set route, and they'll try to locate smoke, and they'll go to that smoke and determine if it is a wildfire or a control burn. If they determine that it is a wildfire, then they'll take a GPS coordinate and send that back into our regional office, and we'll dispatch out appropriate resources. And if we could possibly also call out the fire department, and by using the GPS, it gives us a real accurate measure of where the fire is, and so we can get to it quickly. This really advances. As a fire, one thing you learn as a firefighter, that the quicker you can get to a fire safely, of course, as it's smaller the fire is, the more chance you have to control it before it becomes a big problem. So our aerial detection using these airplanes is a key factor in that. Also, we utilize bulldozers, as the picture shows here, and these bulldozers are utilized a lot in Kentucky. Typically, if there's any kind of area where we can utilize an old road to cut the fuel off, and you can see here, this bulldozer will be going this way and the other one to go in the other direction. And what they're going to be doing there is cutting an actual break. That blade's probably around 6 feet wide, so they'll go through and actually dig down to the mineral soil and push the leaf litter and any of the hardwood branches or anything that's there to try to clear it down the mineral soil. So if you had a fire approaching this direction, it's going to hit that break in the fuel and go out. And then we also sometimes will burn back, of course, but this is a very important tool that we use is the bulldozers, and they really, they can go around the fire if they can get around it quickly. It's very efficient. We also use hand tools. So like these are some of the wildland firefighters like in the picture earlier. And there's several things here to kind of key in on. You notice that they're, like I said earlier, they're cutting the line down the bare mineral soil here. They're using they're using rakes. Excuse me, and as they go down the hill, they'll go down and try to tie it in. Maybe at the bottom of the hill there's a road or another, maybe a dozer line that they're heading towards, and they're working in unison here. Each person is doing their part and pulling a little bit more off the line. It makes it wider as they go down. So in this case, the fire's approaching probably from this direction, and they're removing the fuel and all the leaf litter and everything. They're pulling it to this side, so it'll all the where the fuel accumulates will be on that side. So, like I said, as they go down the hill, they're going to clear that line out, and then probably a little bit later, somebody will come in behind them and actually burn this line here out. They'll set that fire and have it heading back towards the main fire. That's what the old term fighting fire with fire. But first, you have to have that good fuel break, and the general rule is that it needs to be twice the flame height. So if this fire, it looks like they're around a 6 foot wide line here. So the fire, if it's 3 feet tall, then this line should hold just fine. Okay, we utilize chainsaws a lot on fires. Even bulldozers can, if you get into areas with a lot of ice storm damage, or if there's been a harvest there with a lot of treetops, even the bulldozer can get stuck trying to push all that debris, and you have to go in ahead of them with a chainsaw here. And this picture here illustrates, even though we have to use our protective equipment like before, the Nomex shirt and the hard hat, of course, but also there's added safety equipment that we utilize when we use a chainsaw. You'll notice the orange chaps here. Those are chainsaw resistant chaps, so if you'd happen to have an accident and the chainsaw will get into your leg, these actually have Kevlar fibers on the inside and will stop the chain. So very good safety measure there. All of our chainsaws, they have chain brakes, and also we utilize wedges, which you might have a hard time seeing, but they're on top of the stump, and that also helps us direct the trees when we cut them down. All the other safety equipment is similar. Of course, you will wear hearing protection, but we utilize chainsaws on most of the fires that we go to. The Division of Forestry also utilizes backpack leaf blowers, which is unusual. They're very rarely used out west, but here in Kentucky and eastern hardwoods, they've found that they're very, very productive. If you're wanting to clear off leaves and small twigs and create that fuel break, you can really go through an area a lot quicker than you can with using hand tools. So if you come to a fire that in East Kentucky that the Division of Forestry is on, a lot of times you'll hear those leaf blowers going. Also, one thing I wanted to point out on this slide is you notice there's this heavy log here. Looks like probably was part of a harvest, and the firefighter here with the leaf blowers clearing the light out, and he'll probably actually go all the way around this tree in order to keep it from catching on fire, because that heavy fuel will might burn for days after the fire goes through, and which can cause the fire to jump our fire line. So that's another key point to kind of watch out for, is to make sure that any of the heavy fuel or snags or that type of thing that's close to our line, we have to make sure that those are what we call isolated, so they don't catch on fire in the first place. We utilize we call these engines. It's got a backpack pump in the back of our truck here, and it's got a water tank here. That tank holds 200 gallons, and you can see we can run a hose out and go back in. And typically these are used if we come into a fire, say it's in a grass field or it's just taken off. We can fire our engines up here and spray them out, just like similar to what a volunteer fire department would do, but we don't have near the water capacity they do. Typically, though, we utilize this, and that's what it's being utilized in this illustration, is what we call mop up. And this is a situation where the fire has burned through. What you're seeing here is a dozer line that's part of the control line, which broke the fuel off. The fire would be heading this direction towards this line, and the fire is actually stopped. So the fire here has been contained in this area, but it's not. It's still burning a lot of the heavy fuels. So they'll run the hose back in here to spray those heavy fuels, and we'll just keep running the truck back and forth to and what we call mop up, to keep the fire under control. And that's what we use our engines for quite a bit, and we actually. We sometimes we'll travel to other states even and help them out, and we'll take our engines with them. This is kind of an interesting tool that we utilize. It's called a drip torch, and like I said earlier, we'll cut a line, a fuel break around the fire, and typically what we want to do is go back in, just like this firefighter here is doing. Here's the line that's been put in, and he's got a drip torch there. And you can see where he's came from up here. He's walked down this line, and he's actually burned to the line back towards the main fire, and doing what we call line firing or burnout. And what that does is it'll go ahead and consume the fuel between our fire break and the actual fire. And this tool, drip torch, is very efficient at doing that. In the tank here, you'll have a mixture of gasoline and diesel fuel. Typically it's 3 parts diesel fuel, 1 part gasoline, and then as when you tilt it over, it runs up the spout here to this wick, and you can really spread the fire safely and efficiently that way, and we can get that fire heading back to the line fire heading back towards the main fire, which will help us out a whole lot. If we have a really bad situation, we have what we call a mobilization in the state, and we'll bring resources typically from West Kentucky towards East Kentucky, and we also can pull in the Kentucky National Guard, and typically they help us out with hand crews, and then they also help us with helicopters. It's hard, some of these remote areas, you can't get a vehicle with water or hose up to the fire to help fight the fire with water, but you can use these Black Hawk helicopters here, and they'll take the bucket here, here, and then they'll dip it in the local lake or river, any kind of water source that they can get down to, and then they'll take that water over to the fire and dump it out, and just keep doing that over and over until we get the fire extinguished. So the National Guard helps us out very much so as well. In addition to suppression, we also have a law enforcement that we work. We investigate fires if it's arson or debris, or in any case we try to find the origin, work those fires, and talk to local residents and try to get to the bottom of what happened. Sometimes it's very challenging to do so. And then we also do prevention and just awareness of our fire season's in place, and some people may go out and have a brush pile by their house and they don't realize it's fire season, and they say, well, it's a good day to burn this brush pile. If they'd have been aware that it was maybe a high fire occurrence day, then they could have given us a call and maybe prevented the whole situation. And we have the target arson here. There's a $1,000 reward, and you can keep that number there if you have some information for us. It'll be very helpful. Something that's come along, we're actually utilizing bloodhounds now in Kentucky, which we can go to a fire, and these bloodhounds are amazing creatures. They can track people for miles and miles. It's just amazing, and we're very excited about this to help deter arson here in Kentucky by utilizing these bloodhounds. And we work with the Department of Corrections. They are providing the bloodhounds for us, and we're very appreciative of their cooperation with us. We do fire prevention programs. We take Smokey Bear out to a lot of different functions across the state each year, and just try to spread the message about preventing wildfires. And we target all age groups, but we, like I said, go to schools and try to influence the younger people. I think everybody remembers fondly Smokey Bear coming to their school, and I know it made an impact on me when I was younger. So what can landowners do to protect their woodlands from forest fire damage? This photo here to me is a very good motivation. This is what we're after. A lot of times in your woodland, for a lot of different reasons. This picture of real nice oak tree here. You can see how you've got a real nice straight bowl. The trees, and looks like it's in fantastic health. It's a very potentially high value tree, and you don't want a wildfire to come through with intensity and cause this tree to get the damage, become a cull tree like we showed earlier. So as a landowner, it should be really one of your top priorities is to protect your woodland from having a wildfire race through there, because each time it does, it's just causing that much more damage. And this tree here, it's just, if you had an investment in a bank or something, this tree's probably drawing you a real high interest rate and doing real well for you. So you want to, that's the motivation among many others. But as far as from a timber standpoint, and even if your interest is in wildlife, if you have a high value tree like this later, and you can harvest it at a higher rate and get some really good value out of it, then that frees up more money, that you could possibly spend on wildlife projects. So that's one good way to look at keeping your trees as healthy as possible. One of the biggest things that landowners can do is actually create fire breaks. If you have this is a picture here of probably a dozer, where a dozer's gone through and maybe cleared out an old road, and you can see that the fuel's been removed here, and that's the key thing. This will be every year, because the leaves would naturally fall, and anytime the leaves fall on a road like this, it would the fire break, the fires could just go right across. But you can see here that they've took it down to bare mineral soil and created this. It's probably maybe 10 foot wide, so that's a real good fire break. This could be potentially around the edge of your property. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but that way, if you have a fire, it's approaching from your neighbors, and it's coming this way, and you're at work or wherever, if that fire's coming this direction, if you got all that, you got a real good chance that the fire may not cross your line. And by then, maybe one of our rangers has arrived at the fire, and he can utilize this road and go ahead and burn off. And that's happened several times where we've had landowners that had fire breaks on their property, and it really helped us out a lot once we arrived at the fire. Another thing, as a landowner, you can control and maintain access roads. These roads coming in really make it, the quicker, like I said earlier, that we can get out to a fire and get to that fire, the better chance we can control it at a smaller size, which is going to, naturally cause less damage. Here, this situation here, there's a gate up, which is good. The landowner can control access. So on the front end, might prevent an arsonist from coming into their property to start with to actually start a fire. But then also, once the fire started, you might even talk, and we'll talk about that later, if you have a forester come out, have access where we can come through and get access back in your property, and maybe even go over your fire plan with Division of Forestry, forester or ranger, either one, and go ahead and have all that worked out beforehand. And that way, we hope that you don't have a fire, but if you do, this will make controlling it a whole lot easier. The road system here, this is a great road. It's nice and wide as far as access. And as far as a fire break, this is fantastic. So because you have the width of the road, and then you've also got this green area here on both sides. So this could be 30, 40 feet of a fire break. So you could potentially control a fire that has 20-foot flame lengths here, because, like I said, the formula on that is the width of the fire break is twice the height of the flames. So this will be a great fire break here as well. Probably one of the most important things that you can do to protect your property from a wildland fire, and then also at the same time you can assess to see if you've actually had fire damage in your property, is to have a forest stewardship plan written by the Kentucky Division of Forestry. Our foresters can come out and take a look at your property and write a forest stewardship plan for you. It's free of charge. There's no obligation. So it's really, I guess you'd say, a no-brainer to have that done. If you own woodland in Kentucky, you should definitely take advantage of this. There's actually a potential that you could get cost share for to have some of these practices completed. So definitely check into that. And as we go along, at the end, I'll have contact information for the Division of Forestry. But it's a great resource to have. Oftentimes, the forester will have the local county ranger technician go out with them, who is will be the fire control expert in that county, and they can look at and help you with some ideas on the fire breaks and access, like we had talked about before. So definitely look into if you haven't already, have a stewardship plan written for your property. Changing gears a little bit for the landowner, we've talked about the woodland. Some of the things that can be done in the woodland setting, but there's also a lot of things that can be done at the level as far as right around your home or a structure that you have on the property. And one of the programs that we work with here in Kentucky and it's a national program, is the Firewise Community Program, and it encourages local solutions for landowners. I know everybody's probably seen the videos from out west in California where they lose, they might lose 50 homes in one day due to a wildfire. And thankfully we don't have that here in Kentucky, but there has been, and continue to be homes and structures lost just about every year here in Kentucky due to wildfire. So we have a lot of potential. And what happens is people. We naturally like to live near the woods or in the woods, and as we do that, as we move closer and closer to woodland areas, we have the potential to have problems with fires threatening our homes. And that brings up a subject, wildland-urban interface, and basically what that means is where the wildland and the urban areas, or where our homes are, is actually where they meet. the human development meeting undeveloped wildland. An uncontrolled wildfire can spread from wildland vegetation to encroaching structures, or can spread from a structure to surrounding vegetation. This photo here that we have is a actual fire here that was occurred here in Kentucky, and it's of course at nighttime. You can see this fire is backing down this hill, and it's late at night, so the humidity is high, so it's burning pretty good. This home here is definitely needs to be aware of what's going on. Of course, you see there's looks like some type of outbuilding here. I don't know exactly what all's in behind the home, but it very well could be threatened. It looks like there's a green yard up here and everything, but this is definitely a concern. And this happens, unfortunately, happens quite a bit during our fire season here in Kentucky. And the way to become fire wise is, of course, not when a fire is threatening your home, but before. There's a lot of planning that can take place, and a lot of things that you can do to your home or another structure that would have it ready as possible if you are threatened with a forest fire. Because nobody wakes up in the morning and say, I'm gonna have a forest fire threatening my home today. It always catches everybody off guard. So right now is the time to get prepared for that. And one of the first concepts that you want to look at is defensible space. And this is one of the critical concepts in dealing with a wildland-urban interface problem. So, this picture here shows a home, and there's a lot of different things to look at here, potential problems. The first one that I look at is this home is up on a hill. So if a fire comes uphill, which we talked about earlier, and it'll come up at a lot faster rate than it would be backing down the hill. So anytime you have a home up on a high up on the hill, which there's nothing wrong with that, it's just you have a high potential. If a fire races up the hill, it's going to be a lot harder, and it's going to cause potentially could cause a lot more damage. Another issue here, the leaf litter. It's all near the home here. There's also a lot of vegetation up close to the home, which could spread the fire in. Looks like there's leaves on top of the roof here. You got a wood side. Don't know from the picture here about the access, but it definitely looks like there's not a place for a fire truck a fire engine to turn around, which can be critical. If a fire's threatening your home, if the volunteer fire department shows up and they can't have, they don't have access to your home, that causes a huge problem. So that's definitely all things to think about here as far as having defensible space around your home. If this homeowner was away at work and the fire threatened and there was no access from the volunteer fire department, and we didn't get out there in time to put a line around, it could definitely be in a bad situation quickly. This photo here, kind of a little bit more of a typical of what you would want to shoot for as far as having defensible space. The space should initially be provided by the developer and later maintained by the homeowner. I think that's a key point. When homes are built, there's a lot of things that can be done initially that will keep a lot of problems from occurring down the road. This illustration here, it shows you got a nice green yard here, which should prevent any spread of the fire up to the home. The shrubbery is small and it's green, which is a good thing. There's no leaf litter or anything around the home here. If you notice, there's a water hose here, which is always good. You've got access to water, as a last resort, of course, but if you needed to. So this home is, from the photo here, is a lot more fire-wise or has a lot more defensible space than the previous photo. This illustration here talks about, are you fire-wise? And it goes through a lot of different steps. There's a lot of things that you may or may not think about. The first, of course, is the accessibility through this driveway. That should be, and you can actually, in a lot of cases, talk to your local volunteer fire department, and a lot of times they'll come out and take a look at it for you and make sure that they can get turned around and have access to your home. That's very critical. Even beyond a fire threatening your home, if you actually have problems with your home, a structure fire in your home, that's another good reason to go ahead and make sure you have good access. They also have here the garden hose again, the chimney itself, if it clean and screened, so that we do have several fires every year that are started from a structure fire. So that's one way to prevent a forest fire, is to make sure you don't have a structure fire, of course. We got the vegetation mowed 100 feet away from the structure. That's very important. Any wood piles that you might have for firewood, 30 feet from the structure. Avoid outdoor burning. That's a biggie. If there's you might be able to recycle the mulch or compost when possible. There's really no issues at all with creating brush piles in your woodland. Can create really good wildlife habitat. You don't necessarily have to burn every pile of brush that you have. Everybody's probably got a storage shed, and you want to locate that away from your home. That will help prevent other, if the shed will catch on fire, which is a bad thing, but at least that will keep it from spreading to the house. And you can thin and prune any of the coniferous trees. And also here, they don't really have it listed, but the mailbox, we have a lot of issues with fire departments responding to structure fire or even to a wildfire, and there's no address for them when they actually come up. If your lane is far away from your home, to make sure that it's marked well so they'll know how to get to your home. There's a lot of opportunities through this National Firewise program. There's funding available to assist communities with the wild and urban interface in their areas. A lot of these activities go through volunteer fire departments. This photo here is one of the Firewise communities actually in Round County, and this is actually one of the days that they've had grant opportunities to go out and actually do some of this work around homes that are identified as having the potential to have wildfires threaten them, and they'll go out and actually assess the area, and if they find homes that have that potential, then they can actually come in and help clear around them and what we call mitigate or reduce the potential of having problems with their homes being involved with a brush fire. And as we go along, if you're interested in this or your community, be sure and contact us at the Division of Forestry. We'd be happy to help you along with this. If you have any questions concerning the prescribed fire, feel free to contact the Kentucky Prescribed Fire Council, and you've got the contact information here. If you have any trouble with that, you can also get a hold of us here at the Division of Forestry, and we'll be happy to help you along. Here in Kentucky, you can see we're broken up into 5 regions, and we have our regional office, and you can find the county that your property's in and contact that local regional office. Also, if you have any issues with that, you can feel free to contact our Frankfurt office, and we'll be sure and get you in touch with the right people. And then lastly, we have our contact information We have our website, and feel free to visit that, forestry.ky.gov. And if all else fails, you can contact me personally, Floyd Willis. I'm the fire management chief, and you can contact me here at the Frankfort office.
Well, Floyd, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. I know we got woodland owners out there right now thinking about their own property, hopefully, and if they're not fire-wise, hopefully that's something they'll be looking for as well. We did get a few questions come up while you were talking, and we'll try to scroll up and find those questions here. And I will encourage folks, go ahead and submit any questions that you have for us. Please just put them in the chat pod, and we'll try to get to those as quick as we can. Looks like one. Why does fire burn faster uphill than downhill, Floyd?
Well, it's one of the few things in nature that actually goes against gravity faster than it does with gravity. One illustration, you can see people with a match. You can turn a match upside down and the flames. Well, it has the fuel above it on the slope, and it actually, as it progresses up the hill, it actually preheats the fuel. Okay. And I've seen fires that was intense enough that it created its own wind uphill. Wow. And typically what it'll do is it'll form a V, and the top of that V is what we call the head of the fire. Right. And that will race up the hill. And so, I'm sure there's a lot more science to it if you got down, but typically it's all about the fuel. Right. And then a lot of times here in when we deal in East Kentucky with the slope, the steeper the slope, the faster it'll go uphill, just like if that match was turned straight up. Yeah,
we certainly have some steep slopes in Eastern Kentucky without a doubt. I think there was a couple more in there as well. Let's see. Please explain some of the variables in a controlled or prescribed fire.
Okay. Well, the variables, of course, the first thing you want to look at is the weather, the day that you're going to burn. So what ends up happening is you need to have a plan way before. You need to designate the area that you're going to burn, and this is after everything's been approved, and this is the way it's handled, by, like, say, the U.S. Forest Service. Right. This is how they approach prescribed fire. So they have an area that they want to burn, and then they'll go in and put control lines in, and they make sure that everything's ready to go, and they want to make sure how they're going to burn it. Typically try to burn it downhill for the most part, depending on what their objective is. And then there's windows, what we call, that they can burn in. So if the humidity gets below 20%, then they just call it off. Right. If the wind is above, a certain amount, then they just call it off. But if everything lines up in that window, then they'll go ahead with the burn. Right. There's a lot of other issues you have to watch out for that you may not think about if you're near a local highway. Yeah. If you put a lot of smoke on that highway, you have to be real careful. We don't want somebody to wreck. We also don't want to put a bunch of smoke in a community. Right. You got people that may have a lot of breathing problems. Right. So there's a whole gamut of things that need to be considered. Right. Also, what type of fuel you're burning. If you're a lot of times we burn out areas of warm season grass, and it's a flashy fuel. It will burn very quick, very hot, and you have to be very cognizant of that. If you burn in a stand of oak that's got a lot of snags, my snags, dead trees that are standing, and they stay burning after you leave, and you might have a potential of jumping the line. So I guess to answer your question, there's thousands of variables, and it's a very intense and tough thing to do is prescribe fire. Right. But it can be done, and it's done every year. But it's professionals. And they're really doing everything they can to make sure everything's lined up when they do that.
Yeah, it's certainly very complicated, and it's not something you want to just kind of go into very lightly. Yeah, and
because weather in Kentucky, if you don't like the weather, just wait a little bit and it'll change.
Yes, sir.
So there's days that we'll have a little bit of rain in the morning, and everybody kind of thinks, well, everything's fine. And then you have this huge wind event right behind it. And then the rain wasn't really that much, and you can have huge fires on days that you have a little bit of rain. So those are all things that need to be taken into account.
Awesome. Good response. Let's see, we had another one here. What are the frequency of impacts of lightning on wildfires?
Well, lightning, like I said, in Kentucky is a very small number of fires. typically what happens on the lightning fires that I've been involved in is they actually start really high up on the hill. Right. Usually no dead tree, dead snake. Lightning will strike it, and it'll actually sit there and kind of burn for a few days. And if it's dry, which see most time in Kentucky when we have lightning, we have pretty good rain. Right. Out west, that's not the case. So you have a lightning strike. It's burning an old dead tree for a couple of days, and then it'll start usually on top of the hill and burn out away. Right. And it's usually in, not always, but it can be in a real remote area a lot of times. So the fire might burn for a while before we even find out about it. So, and it seems like a lot of those fires we have, lightning fires, are out of our regular fire seasons, right. And like during the summertime, and it's maybe not when we're flying our planes. So right. That's what I've typically found. But if all the problem we had was lightning fires, we'd be in really good shape as far as you know, the Division of Forestry on our responsibility on controlling wildfire.
Right. So. Yeah. Unfortunately, that one slide you showed us that had all of the arson. You know, that's kind of heartbreaking. You know, I mean, for landowners managing their woods and trying to do the right thing with them, and then to have to deal with that. But certainly being prepared, I think I really like some of the things you were talking about, having the fire breaks in there, and I think, you know, having an engaged and working with a forester and having that relationship is absolutely critical as well.
Yeah, so. There'll be things that typically every time a forester goes out, there's things that a landowner will find out about their property that they didn't know. Sure. So that's really good. Yeah.
All right, folks, please take advantage of this opportunity. We've got Floyd here. Again, Floyd's the Fire Management Chief with the Kentucky Division of Forestry. It's a relatively new position for you, though, Floyd. I mean, you spent your time in Northeast Kentucky for a long time, first as a service forester, and then you've worked your way up to a regional forester up there. So, so now you're in Frankfort fighting fire. I know you fought a lot of fire in Northeast Kentucky and out west and all over the place. So I'm so glad for you to be able to bring your firsthand knowledge and experience to share with the folks out there. So yeah, please don't miss this opportunity to get some questions to Floyd, and we'll hang around for another minute or so, see if there's anything else. We missed one too, Floyd. Sorry about that. It says, is it feasible to use drone aircraft for fighting wildfires? Well, that's a pretty interesting.
That's a real good question. It's very feasible. There's a lot of issues with drones, of course. A lot more issues than I even know about myself. But I know there was a occurrence in California when a drone that was not part of the fire. A private drone caused problems with the fire itself. So there's a lot of issues with the drone. Drones are coming on so fast that they're having a hard time figuring out what they're going to do.
Right. Kind of ahead of the regulations and stuff. Right.
But I predict in the future that drones will could be a very huge part of wildland fire, because you could go to that fire and actually, they have cameras and everything in the world, and you can go right around the fire and get a real good scout. Yep. That's typically what we do, but we do it on foot now.
Right.
When Ranger Tech or the incident commander of that fire arrives, that's one of the first things they'll do is actually scout the fire, get a size up, give us an idea of what we have. Right. And you could use drones and really, and like I said, make it that quicker response and quicker action makes all the difference in the world on fire.
Well, no doubt. You could see how that could maybe save from putting somebody in a dangerous situation that you otherwise might not. So, yeah, great question. Very interesting. Looked like we had another one coming up, did we? What species of trees are most likely to come back following a clear burn? Or maybe it's clear burn, I think.
Clear burn?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of ifs to that.
It depends, right?
Yeah. Well, one thing to look at is what trees can withstand the fire. What trees, and there's probably other folks that could speak better to that than me. But typically, you could take a red maple tree, which is very common in Kentucky, versus a white oak tree. Right. White oak tree puts a lot of its emphasis when it's early on growing into root growth. Right. So when a fire comes through, it has a better potential as it's younger to resprout. And a big chunk of the trees that we have in Kentucky are stump sprouts, and that's why we have a lot of the oak and hickory that we have. So typically during a regime, you could, if it's done properly, the idea is that you could have, if you have small red maple, which has a thin bark, it can't withstand the fires over time. The problem that you get into is that racing uphill and backing, and there's all these variables. It's really hard to control. Right. So you could have if you're not careful, you could have a fire that you're intending to burn and actually cause the oaks to, might help them out, but you might end up with a racing wildfire. If it's a prescribed fire that jumps your line and it becomes a wildfire.
Right.
So it could do that and then cause damage to the larger trees that you have. Right. But over time, out west, there's trees that will only sprout back due to fire. Right. Their seed, their cones, and everything will only respond after a fire. And in Kentucky, there's trees that are more resistant. You have chestnut oak, bur oak, a lot of those trees that have thicker bark that have been more resistant to that. But the unfortunate thing that I've noticed in a lot of eastern Kentucky areas is after a really hard burn, we have invasive species, which I know you probably have a whole webinar on that.
Yes.
But one that comes to mind, tree of heaven. Sure. You can have it just loves that area. If you have a really hot burn, it can really come in there. Also, there's areas in East Kentucky that have Chinese silvergrass, which is a grass, but it's an invasive. Yeah. There's a lot of invasive species that love that disturbance. Right. So that's something else we also have to keep in mind as we we have wildfire and even some of the prescribed burning.
Yeah. So. I like that one picture you showed earlier too when you were talking about the damage and which trees can withstand it. And I think a lot of times for landowners out there, they think if things just get green next year, everything's okay, but they may not really understand that there's been a lot of damage to those trees and to the long-term value of those trees.
I always think about a tree is on a whole lot slower pace than we are. You might have a fire come through, and then the damage may not show up for 5 years. Yeah. But I know of trees, myself personally, that the same tree's been hollow all of my life. It's been in the woods that are hollow from a fire for 40 years, and probably more than that. If you trace it back. So all that crown space and all that energy is going. You're not getting that production from that the wood production. So and it also causes the tree to be a lot weaker. Right. So that damage. That's the key thing as far as what happens in each state. We would have a lot more valuable timber, and it really makes a big difference. In any scenario that you have going forward with your woodland, any type of goal that you have, I always feel like it's good to have high value trees there. I don't see why you wouldn't want to.
Exactly.
So there's the thing is, a lot of people. We're not out in the woods all the time, and it's kind of forgotten. But you can go through a lot of the stands, and unfortunately in East Kentucky, and you see a lot of that damage. Mm-hmm. One key thing, though, is to remember to walk on the uphill side looking down. Because I've seen stands that look beautiful walking at the bottom, and then you go on around to the top, and they're all hollow.
You're like,
I've had that.
A little heartbreaking.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah. Let's see. Maybe we got another one come in there. Can you see that one? Looks
pyrophytic versus fire-resistant plants. Any thoughts on this?
Maybe we're talking about some of the fire-wise selection and some of the plant selection there. I think maybe that's what they're trying to get at.
Yeah, you can definitely, and we can have a whole list of preferred species to plant. Right. And then you can also do that along with other things. You don't necessarily want to plant a tree that's going to grow huge right next to a power line. There's a lot of issues there. Sure. But if you are interested in the Firewise program, we can get those set up for you and actually help you with what species is the best to plant. Okay. In California, they have species that are extremely fire. Right. They burn like gasoline. Right. We don't necessarily have those here. Yeah. But the thing we do have is, we have that dead versus live. Mm-hmm. That seems to be the most important thing here. Is if you got a tree that it's it's going to be green, or if it is a hardwood, remove that leaf litter whenever it goes dormant. So,
good advice, good guidance. I was going to say, folks, if you do have other questions that maybe you can't think of right now that you want to get answered later, feel free to drop us an email. You can email us at forestry.extension@uky.edu, and I can actually put that in the little chat pod here for us, and you can just shoot us an email, and we would be happy to respond to you later in case you think of something. And we will stick around for another couple minutes if there's any more questions. Hopefully I spelled that right, Floyd. Carl, thank you. Thanks for all the great questions you are sharing and some of those links as well. Well, Floyd, any other things we need to share with the folks before we wrap this up? Looks like questions are kind of trickled down on us.
Well, just feel free to contact the Division of Forestry. We do a lot of other things besides fire. The Forest Stewardship Program. We have our tree nurseries, and we also have our state forest and a lot of different things that we're doing. So
a lot of great services.
Just feel free to contact us really with any questions that you have with the woodland.
It's a great resource, and I did notice that we had some folks from other states as well that were on tonight. I know we had some folks from Pennsylvania and stuff, and I'd say most of all of those have their own own divisions of forestry.
Absolutely,
and stuff to work with
when we work, we have contact with a lot of different states, and like I said. We traveled to other states. We went to Alaska this year on
help
fire.
them out.
Help them out. And then in the past, we've had states come here and help us. So we definitely cooperate and learn. There's a lot of things to learn from other states. So.
Okay. Good deal. All right, so folks, we're going to go ahead. We'll wait just a moment. It looks like we got somebody typing if there's any more questions, but other than that, we want to thank you again for being with us tonight. We certainly do appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedules to be with us. This information could be really valuable. Please put it to use on your property. And don't let it go to waste. So, let's see. Anything else there? Excellent job. All right, thank you, Wayne. Appreciate that. Oh, looks like we got somebody from New York as well. Excellent. Well, we're delighted to have everybody with us tonight. And again, thanks to all of our county extension agents that are serving as hosts out there, as well as you folks watching from home. We really appreciate that. I will say again, this is the last of the webinar series here for 2015 for UK Forestry Extension. We have a total of 5 webinars this season that we did. And 3 of those are already up. The recordings are available at our website, ukforestry.org. And these last 2 recordings will be up in just a few weeks, Floyd. So have a chance for others to kind of check out your message as well. So again, have a good night. And signing off from UK Forestry Extension. We'll see you later.
Thank you.